The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keane. A Manta Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocast Icke hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want Bizong leggings? Wait. Are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keane and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keane and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keane.
And I am a very sleepy Christopher Golden. I don't know why I'm so sleepy, Brian, but I anticipate...
Can you give me a sleepy Excelsior?
Oh, Excelsior.
Excelsior, true believers. I want to apologize to our listeners in advance. If you're a regular listener to the horror show with Brian Keane, then you are, of course, familiar with my 10-year-old son, Dungeon Master 77.1. That's not his real name. I'm not some crazed hipster who named him that. But that's the name that he uses in public. He is playing a video game in the background. And although I've turned it down, if you hear the occasional sound in the background, that's him. So got that out of the way. How are you, Chris? Are you awake now? Have I stalled long enough for you to take?
No, I'm now. You put me to sleep. No, I'm awake. I'm awake. And you know, one of the you mentioned this in the last episode, Brian, but Defenders 101 is such a fantastic issue.
It really is. It's groundbreaking.
Yeah, well, and it reminds me so much of issues that I always loved of, for instance, the X-Men, when there was an issue when literally all they did was have a picnic and play baseball.
Yep.
You know, it's that kind of stuff. And these are the kinds of things that I miss in, in modern comics.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Because it's all character. The whole issue is nothing but character.
Yep. There's no villain. There's no great threat to the world. It's just character building. And now don't get us wrong, true believers. It's not going to make you as sleepy as Chris is. There's still conflict. There's still drama. But yeah, there's not the headmen trying to take over the world.
I'm awake now.
You're awake now?
No, you're right. It is drama. It's superhero drama. It's character and story. I love it. I mean, this is the kind of thing that this is the place that you could jump in and learn everything you need to know about the team and the characters. And again, I mean, they would do this occasionally in those days, and I remember a million years ago I was reviewing comics back in the early 90s for several publications, many times under pseudonyms that I have still not revealed. And I reviewed a Marvel Comics Presents serial that my old friend Scott Lobdell was writing. And Wolverine and Nightcrawler in this one part of the serial encounter one another for the first time in a while, old friends, and they just go up and they hug. And I remember, reviewing that and saying how much I missed that kind of interaction, even at that point in these comics. And of course, somebody wrote a letter, trolling that post. This is pre-social media, but people still wrote in letters, trolling things you said in magazines. And I just thought, well, it's sad for that person that this is not something they appreciate. But, there we go.
Right. Well, I appreciate the hell out of Defenders 101. Of course, written by J.M. DeMatteis. Even though the Six-Fingered Hand saga is over, his run on the book is just getting started. And, of course, drawn by Don Perlin and Joe Sennett. And we open back at Doctor Strange's house. Keep in mind they have defeated Satan, and hell has returned to hell, but the son of Satan has gone with his father back to hell, and we see all of the defenders, basically every major defender except for Luke Cage, Red Guardian, and Daredevil,
right,
are assembled here on the page, and everyone is sad except for the Hulk.
Exactly. And the Hulk says, go ahead, Brian.
Why does everyone act like something bad happened? We beat devils, didn't we? World is safe, isn't it?
Yeah. And Hulk is frustrated because he wants to, celebrate because they won. And Hellcat then gets angry. She actually snaps at the Hulk and basically gives him, rips him a new one, explaining that, they lost Damon. And of course she has feelings for him, and she also feels responsible for what happened. And then Hulk picks her up and says, why does Catgirl yell at Hulk? What did Hulk do wrong? And it makes her snap out of it and realize she's being totally unfair. And she asks for Hulk's forgiveness.
And I love this sequence.
Go ahead.
She says, do you forgive me? Typical Hellcat. She's happy one minute and mad the next. And she asks Hulk, do you forgive me? And Hulk says, no. And he shoves her down on the couch. Hulk has had enough.
Yeah, the Hulk once again has had enough. And interestingly enough, he says Hulk doesn't care about sorry, doesn't care about defenders. Nobody smiles anymore. Nobody is nice to Hulk anymore. And if nobody is nice, then there's no reason for Hulk to stay.
And just
so
like
Hulk
that,
runs away
gone.
from home to join the circus. No, he doesn't actually join the circus.
But Prince Namor agrees. He agrees with the Emerald Brute. He finds this somber, brooding atmosphere almost as oppressive as the atmosphere when Hell was on Earth. So he leaves the Defenders and returns to his undersea kingdom. So there's two of the originals gone.
Yep, and again, all part of Dematis's plan.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Who is the next to fall?
Well, the next is one already fallen, Brian. Our friend Kyle Richmond, a.k.a. Nighthawk, the Defender you love to hate and hate to love, who is, once again during the daytime, paralyzed, says, yeah, I'm going to go back to my life as Kyle Richmond. I'm still your friend as Kyle, but Nighthawk's out of the Defenders, and he leaves.
That's right. So it looks like everybody's leaving. Valkyrie says to Devil Slayer, and what of you, Eric Simon Payne? Will you be leaving as well? And he says, leaving? Where do you suggest I go? With the demon threat over, I have no purpose. What's a Devil Slayer without devils to slay?
All I can think of is Richard Gere in An Officer and a Gentleman. I got nowhere else to go!
But the Silver Surfer, who has often been one of Marvel's most melodramatic characters. He was the original emo, as far as I'm concerned. The Silver Surfer, says to Devil Slayer, you sound like I used to sound, and he gives the rest of the Defenders a speech.
Right. Yep. And he also including basically saying, and Doctor Strange says basically that he feels the same way as Devil Slayer, which surprises the Silver Surfer because that's not Doctor Strange's way. He's usually the one to rally the troops and say, okay, enough of this, let's move on, we have work to do. But he also is blaming himself for various things that have happened along the way. And he says, I was as naive and bumbling as a mere novice. And the Silver Surfer says, what was your crime, Doctor? That you were human, that you were flawed. That's no transgression. That is simply the way of things. And Gargoyle's very excited and says, we're alive. We saved the world. Let's not be babies and cry in our milk. There's more conversation about that. Hellcat
right.
And go ahead.
Well, then Hellcat and Valkyrie decide to go visit Hellcat's housekeeper, Dolly, in the hospital. Now, you'll remember that Gargoyle is the one who put her in the hospital. but he goes along with them.
Yep. And Gargoyle, let me just interrupt and say, the best thing about Gargoyle here is the wisdom, right? He says, look, there's nothing like thinking about yourself, about others to get your mind off yourself. So he basically says, look, we're all moping and feeling sorry for ourselves. Let's go visit somebody who is really in trouble. Let's go visit Dolly. And he's touched by and honored to have Hellcat invite him to go, since he's really responsible for what happened to Dolly in the first place.
Right. And Hellcat returns the Shadow Cloak to Devil Slayer.
Yep.
And then the three of them depart, which leaves Clea, Silver Surfer, Doctor Strange, and Devil Slayer behind.
Right. And then and the Silver Surfer wants to give them to give them a journey, to bring them with him in something that he feels will refresh their souls. And Clea persuades Doctor Strange to go along, but of course, Devil Slayer resists any cure to his brooding.
That's my boy.
And then there you go. Everything you need to know about Brian Keene wrapped up in one line. Brian Keene resists any cure for his brooding, ladies and gentlemen.
And I love the transition here by Perlin and Sinnott. On the one page we have Surfer and Strange and Clea flying off, and they look so happy. Particularly Clea. I don't know that she's ever been drawn more beautiful than she is in that panel. And then the very next panel, Eric Simon Payne watches their departure through rheumy, bloodshot eyes. Never has he felt so tired, so adrift.
And this begins, Brian, I know you love this character, so I want you to be the one to discuss this, but it begins a side story for Eric Simon Payne that is really interesting.
Right.
And continues on for a bit. So go ahead and discuss our friend Sunshine.
So yes, Devil Slayer is walking the streets of New York in, out of costume. He looks like just any other human being, and he comes across a homeless man. Now, this homeless person is obviously a flower child of the 60s. He's wearing a Woodstock shirt. He still has the hair, although he's also balding. Looks a little bit like Reggie Bannister out of Phantasm if Reggie had fallen on hard times. He's playing a guitar, and he's singing a song about that era. The lyrics, which include John Lennon was the walrus, Eric Clapton was God, Nixon was in power, Agnew was a pod. Take a note, Chris. When we have J.M. DeMatteis on the show, that's another question we have to ask him. Did he write those lyrics?
One would assume.
I like them.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got his guitar case open. People were throwing money in. Devil Slayer stops, listens, and strangely enough, this homeless person, whose name is Sunshine, is able to see Devil Slayer for who he really was. He doesn't see a civilian in regular garb. He sees the Devil Slayer costume and the Shadow Cloak.
Yep, he's able to use Devil Slayer is able to use a telepathic screen to make people see him as if he is in his civilian clothes. But Sunshine actually sees through that. And Eric Simon Payne gets pissed off because he thinks only demons can breach those telepathic walls. Only demons can see him for who he really is. So he assumes that Sunshine is either a demon or the servant of a demon. Right.
So he confronts him, gives chase. Sunshine trips over his own guitar case, takes a very bad fall, and pleads with Devil Slayer not to hurt him. And Eric Simon Payne realizes, no, he is no spawn of hell, just a wretched son of Earth.
Yeah, there you go. Again, definitely we should talk to J.M. DeMatteis about this issue when we have him on.
Agreed.
Anyway, we cut to the hospital. Actually, we cut to the bus, which, interestingly, we talked last episode about moments that have influenced us at times we don't even know influenced us.
Yeah.
And this may be one of those for me. this is Hellcat and Valkyrie in civilian clothes, Gargoyle in a overcoat and top hat with a scarf pulled up to cover all of his face except his eyes. They're on the back seat of a bus, and there's a little kid hanging over the back seat trying to talk to Gargoyle. He says, "Psst, hey, mister, how come you're dressed like that? You a spy or something?" And then the kid's playing, Agent X9 to X10, come in, X10. While this is happening, Hellcat and Valkyrie are having a real heart-to-heart, in which Hellcat is sharing with Valkyrie her feelings about having been violated, essentially her PTSD over what's happened with Satan, but also that Valkyrie is really the best friend she's ever had, the only one who's ever made it over the wall that she's constructed between herself and the outside world and other people. So it's a very sweet moment while the funny thing is happening with Gargoyle and the kid. And I just wanted to make the connection because there's a scene in a Baltimore comic book that I wrote, a short Baltimore story called The Tank, that has a little kid bugging the shit out of Baltimore at his table at this tavern. And I looked at this page and I went, I wonder if this was in the back of my head, even though I read it so many years earlier, you know?
I'm sure it was. Rereading this run, I see stuff, little things that you and I both have picked up, unknowingly picked up. We're going to talk when we get to, I think it's issue 103, Gargoyle's standalone story. We're going to talk about how I lifted that hole unknowingly. But I bet it's not just you and I. I bet there's a lot of other people that DeMatteis has influenced with this run as well.
Right. Yeah.
But we then get to the hospital, and Dolly is, of course, very, very excited to see Patsy and Valkyrie. She's in the children's ward, and she's reading a book to the children. And then when they show up, she runs over to hug them. Gargoyle kind of stands in the background. Now, you'll remember that when Gargoyle injured Dolly, Damon Hellstrom healed her and made everybody in the neighborhood think that a fire had happened rather than, the Gargoyle actually attacked the house. That is what Dolly believes as well. And, Gargoyle is startled by this. And before he can say anything else, Valkyrie's introducing him as Isaac Christians. And then one of the sick little kids pulls the scarf off Gargoyle's face, revealing him, for the monster that outwardly he appears to be. And Isaac tenses. He's ready for shrieks of horror. But instead, Dolly smiles and says, "Oh, you must be another one of Patsy's unusual friends, like that Hulk fellow that she brought around."
And my favorite is the little kid who all I could think of is seeing this response. Most kids would see Gargoyle's face and scream and run, but this kid must be more like Dungeon Master because he says, "Gee, you're the neatest looking guy I ever seen."
That is exactly how Dungeon Master would react in this situation. So, yeah, very realistic. Again, I said it earlier in the run, but DeMatteis' sons, of course, they're our age now, and they've gone on to do really awesome things, like Adult Swim and other stuff. But I have to suspect that the kids he was writing during this run, he was using his own kids as models because they ring very true.
Yeah. Well, the other scene, the thing that follows in this scene is, Patsy's sort of overcome with her relief and the sort of welling up of emotions that she's been kind of carrying with her. And a little girl who clearly has been going through chemotherapy because she's bald and looks like a cancer patient, comes up to Patsy and says, "Why are you crying, lady? There's really no reason to cry. Can I sit in your lap?" Her name is Serena. She has cancer, and Patsy feels sad for her. And the little girl, Serena, says, "Don't feel bad. I know a lot of people think cancer is a big deal, but I don't. I know a secret that all the grown-ups and doctors and stuff don't know. I know, and it's very sweet and sincere. I know that the whole world's a special magic place, and that as soon as you find out the magic's there, it won't hurt you or let you die or anything. Just as long as you treat everybody nice, that is." And this sort of innocence, like not even sort of innocence, this sort of pure, unadulterated innocence is just cuts through everything that's going on with Patsy and makes her realize that what she's crying about is really not that important in comparison to this little girl who's battling her illness. This is the kind of thing that I always loved, and this is the hallmark, I think, of this series and also of this era, which is that you have these characters interacting with the real world and real world situations in a way that we don't see often enough as the comics like go on.
Exactly.
There's real sentiment, and a lot of people are going to say this is saccharine, this is whatever, but I'm definitely not one of them. I went to see Christopher Robin last night with my wife, and we loved every minute of it. So
yeah. Dungeon Master has seen that. His grandmother took him. I have not seen it yet, but I got his review, and he thinks it would make me sad. Parts of it.
I thought it was great.
Yeah. I tell you what I think is great. This next sequence in the book, probably my favorite sequence in the book, Devil Slayer aside. The Surfer brings Doctor Strange and Clea to a village in Africa where he goes for solace. He explains to them that the people in that village accepted him without rancor, without fear, without questions. And they do the same to Doctor Strange and Clea. They have a big feast, a big party, a big dance, and Doctor Strange tells Clea, he says, "My being swells, my senses overflow. These people have managed to tap into spiritual forces that mystics and yogis spend literal lifetimes seeking. I feel," and he can't even put it into words. And what we get is this fantastic splash page. Now, if you're a regular reader of Doctor Strange, you know that Clea is his lady love, his soulmate. Yet we never, ever see that relationship. And we never saw it in the pages of the Defenders.
Right. We never see the romantic, the romance between them. And especially because even if there are times when they're going out on dates, he's always distracted. He's always, because that's part of the gag, right? I mean, it's like when you had stories about the Flash and he would have to run off, or Spider-Man, and it's always being interrupted. So that's part of the thing with Doctor Strange. He's always, got the weight of the world on his shoulders. And so here we have this moment where we really see the pure connection between these people.
Yeah, they're dancing, they're kissing. It's beautifully written, it's beautifully drawn, and it's not only my favorite sequence in this issue, it's one of my favorite Doctor Strange moments ever for that character.
Right.
For the first time in the Defenders, Doctor Strange is not a dick.
Right. No, yeah, it was great, and it's a beautiful page.
Yep. I'm going to pay for that later. Dungeon Master is going to wonder why I was allowed to say that word and he is not. But
because you're a grown-up.
But, as happy and blissful and joyous as these three Defenders are, Devil Slayer does not feel that way. We return to Greenwich Village, and Sunshine has brought Devil Slayer back to his crash pad, and it is indeed a crash pad. Devil Slayer says it himself. "Devils of Earth, you live here?" It's just this rundown tenement, probably abandoned. His furniture is cardboard boxes. There's a bare mattress on the floor.
We're assuming he's squatting here.
Yeah, artifacts of the 60s are everywhere. A Beatles poster, Jefferson Airplane, Grateful Dead. And then we see, Sunshine's fixings.
Yeah.
And he tells Devil Slayer, He says, "I got black hash, good acid, smack that'll knock you for a loop. Take something, mellow yourself out."
And Devil Slayer is furious. He didn't realize this was going on before, obviously. Then he realizes this is what allowed Sunshine to see through his mental screen. Your ability to perceive reality has been shattered by years of drug taking. And he starts, yelling at him. He's really mad because he was trying to help this guy. And Sunshine, reacts. He says, "Hey man, you're going to hurt me again? Please don't hurt me." is it my fault everything changed on me? That my old lady split back in 71? That my friends started cutting their hair, getting jobs in the straight world? You can't blame me for being what I am. I ain't got nothing else. I mean, what's a freak without someone to be freaky with? And Devil Slayer
says, indeed, yep. Or a Devil Slayer without devils to say. He as hard as it is for Eric Simon Payne to accept, he has something very much in common with this hippie. He says, you have shown me something I never wanted to see, but now I have, and I am grateful. I will be back, and I will help you after I have helped myself.
Yeah.
And Devil Slayer departs.
Yeah, and we will come back to Sunshine and Eric Simon Payne in future issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then he returns in the final page. He returns to Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum to find at sunrise that the Silver Surfer, Gargoyle, Doctor Strange, Clea, Valkyrie, and Hellcat are sitting out on the front stoop. It's 5 a.m, and they're all there renewing themselves, as Doctor Strange says. And Doctor Strange says, would you care to join us? And Devil Slayer says, I believe I would.
That's right.
We end with him joining them on the stairs. And it's a great issue that I think that, I think that modern comics could stand a little bit more of introspection. People complain a lot about, there are people who love Bendis, there are people who hate Bendis. I would like to see a little bit more of this sort of thing in modern comics, modern superhero comics.
I agree. Say what you will about Bendis. I think he definitely tries to do this. And I would bet my comic book collection that Brian Michael Bendis, that this particular issue was indeed an influence on him. But yeah, I mean, he does attempt to do this, especially in the team books that he writes. Right. I would like to see more of it, but I would like to see a little bit more meat to it as well.
Right.
I am gonna, while you introduce our next issue, I am gonna get up and go turn down Dungeon Master's video game because I can hear it. So I suspect that our listeners at home are gonna be able to hear it.
Well, I can't really hear it, but you do that. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So we are taking a break from the Defenders for a moment to cover a couple issues of Marvel Team Up. We begin with Marvel Team Up number 111. And Brian will be very excited because it's a Marvel team-up between Spider-Man and Devil Slayer. Most of you probably know this, but Marvel Team-Up, the classic 70s and 80s Marvel comic, featured Spider-Man in almost every issue, teaming up with one other member of the Marvel Universe. But it never worked out to be one other member because the stories usually dovetailed. There would be arcs where one issue would flow into the next, into the next, into the next. So many of those characters that were the co-stars of that particular issue would flow into the next one and sort of pass it off like a baton in a cross-country race.
Exactly. A few episodes back, we featured a Marvel team-up with Nighthawk right. That was written by J.M. DeMatteis early in his run on Marvel Team-Up. Here we see him again a few issues later. Slowly, he tried to work every one of the Defenders into Marvel Team-Up.
Well, and in this issue, he works all of the current members in. Because right. Even though technically it's Marvel Team-Up with Spider-Man and Devil Slayer, it guest stars the Dynamic Defenders. So you have Namor, Hulk, Doctor Strange, Valkyrie, Clea, and Gargoyle in here along with Devil Slayer. So this one is written by DeMatteis and penciled by Herb Trimpe with inks by Mike Esposito.
Right, and we open with Spider-Man stopping some guys who are getting ready to rob a jewelry store, and he makes quick work of them, but then pain tears through his gut. He feels like he's on fire, and then his Uncle Ben, his dear old dead Uncle Ben appears before him, and Spider-Man says, Uncle Ben, but that's impossible, you're dead. And Uncle Ben says, so are you.
And tries to escort him into heaven. He says, you're dead, and all of these host of angels or dead souls in white robes are trying to escort Spider-Man into the afterlife. When what should appear, Brian?
Devil Slayer. Using the shadow cloak, he steps out of thin air, and he says, "Spider-Man, move away from that beast so that Devil Slayer may deal with him." And then he stabs Uncle Ben through the heart with his sword.
Well, yeah, and he's tackled by Spider-Man, who's furious. And the Devil Slayer says, "Before you condemn me, Spider-Man, look at the being that I have just slain. Look." And Spider-Man looks, and it's a, lizard man.
That's
it's
right.
a dead lizard man demon. And then they realize that all of these so-called angels are working with the lizard man. They're cultists or something who are part of the lizard cult.
That's right.
Mere pawns.
So Devil Slayer and Spider-Man, they make friends.
Yeah, this is my favorite part of this particular story, by the way, because it's the plot, and it's such a great it's such a great MacGuffin. It's a thing where clearly DeMatteis was like, wait, how am I going to make this work? And Devil Slayer takes out what is the equivalent of a business card. Upon the card, the plain white card, is written a phrase in an unintelligible language that Devil Slayer says, "Read this," because it's the one phrase the lizard men can't say.
That's right. J.M. DeMatteis has obviously read his Robert E. Howard because, as we will find out on the next page, this lizard cult all stems from the Conan and King Cole stories of Robert E. Howard, who Marvel had the license to.
Yeah, and by the way, I should say serpent men, not lizard men.
Right. As it turns out, now keep in mind, this was all created by Robert E. Howard for his Conan and Cole stories. But when Marvel got the license to Conan and Cole, they adapted this as well. I
just love the whole conceit.
Yeah, basically, before mankind rose, Earth was ruled by demon races: harpies, spider people, wolf men, and serpent men. The serpent men stuck around even after all the others were gone. And, Cole fought them, Conan fought them, and yet they persist even today, in the highest levels of government and the military and Hollywood, etc. Now,
that would explain a lot.
If I sound like a liberal centrist version of Alex Jones, don't panic. There are people today on Earth who believe that this is true, who don't understand that this all started with Robert E. Howard. There's a guy, David Icke, out of England, who makes a living, shilling this conspiracy theory that the royal family are a reptilian race, and so is Barack Obama and George Bush and everybody else. It's all taken from Robert E. Howard and Marvel Comics.
I love it. Well, no, I was going to say, I just love the idea that Howard set up and that DeMatteis uses to great effect in this issue, that, the way to find out whether or not someone is secretly a serpent man is to hand them a business card and say this phrase. I mean, obviously it wasn't business cards with Howard, but it was like, if you can say this thing written down, then you are human and not a serpent man. I just, it just boggles my mind, but I love it.
I do too. Anyway, Devil Slayer explains to Spider-Man that the Serpent Men have one by one captured the rest of the Defenders. They got Doctor Strange and Clea. They got the Hulk. They got Submariner. They got Gargoyle, Valkyrie. They've captured everybody.
Yeah.
And he has a plan to get them back.
Yeah, well, and again, I mean, I just find this whole thing, it's such a weird story in the sense that Devil Slayer is persuading Spider-Man to go on this quest with him, with just telling him this story. But he talks about, all right, so they end up in Japan, Brian.
That's right.
Uh,
I'm picturing a real life version of this where Alex Jones, and listeners, don't get me wrong, I loathe Alex Jones. Okay, but Alex Jones is one of the people who, in real life, spouts this reptilian, conspiracy theory. I, I'm juxtaposing you as Spider-Man and Alex Jones as Devil Slayer. And how would you react if this strange guy came up and told you this story?
yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. So Spider-Man's like, okay, I'll go to Japan with you, in your magic cloak. So basically, Devil Slayer takes him into the mountains of Japan and explains to him that somewhere near this spot is a temple older than time, and in its dim recesses sits a bejeweled snake-headed statue, the one arcane artifact with the power to destroy the serpent cult. They find this old guy wandering in the mountain and say, "You, old man, do you speak English?" And in the early 1980s, miraculously, the guy, the random dude wandering the mountains of Japan says, "Yes, strangely garbed sir." So handily, he does speak English. Devil Slayer gets angry at him because he won't tell him what he wants to know and whacks him. And Spider-Man gets upset with him. And Devil Slayer is an asshole, but Brian, he is behaving a little out of character even for him.
He is. He says, "You will speak, old man, or I will beat you senseless." And Spider-Man's like, back off. And he gets answers from the old man. And then he thinks, ever since Devil Slayer showed up, my spider sense has been acting crazy. He says, "I don't know why Doc and the rest of the Defenders would hook up with a lunatic like him, but that crew has always been a little weird."
Yeah, I love that line. So he said, but the fate of the world is at stake. So he's, and then Devil Slayer continues to be a dick in the classic Defenders way. "I sense distraction in your thoughts, Spider-Man. Self-absorption. Put aside your mindless musings." Which I love. There's work to be done. And Spider-Man starts to criticize him for his lack of diplomacy. But anyway, they get into the temple. And interestingly enough, even though they're supposed to be deceased or extinct, there are Spider-People defending the statue and the jewel in the head of the statue in the temple.
That's right.
So this is why he's brought Spider-Man along to begin with. But go ahead.
Yeah, they've actually devolved instead of evolved. They've basically reverted back to near brainless creatures, and they attack. And Devil Slayer pulls out weapons and starts killing them, and offers one to Spider-Man. And Spider-Man just he does not accept. He can take care of himself. And he notices that Devil Slayer is lost in a rage, fighting like an animal. He's never seen anyone so vicious, so unrelenting. And again, his spider sense is still going nuts.
Yep. So he has Spider-Man jump across a ravine to the front of the statue, and there's this serpent head that's there in the hands of the statue, and the jewel is there. And so the statue is going to attack. But Devil Slayer shouts to him, "Don't move, don't fight back, don't even move, don't move." And Spider-Man actually listens to him, and the statue stops trying to attack him. So Spider-Man is able to grab that serpent head from the statue. It conveniently comes out, and then they escape back to where they were coming from, to the next destination. Thanks to I want one of these cloaks, Brian. I want a shadow cloak.
Oh, I'd love to have a shadow cloak.
At least I wouldn't have to sit in the airplane seats.
Yeah, they come out in the sewers beneath New York City, and they hear footsteps sloshing in the slime and distant voices, and they creep up, and they assume that it must be the Serpent Men, and when they jump out, they find that it is the Defenders.
There you go. The Defenders are there, and Doctor Strange says that they're defending ourselves. The menace of the Serpent race has ended forever. The Defenders off-screen have already defeated the Serpent Men. Spider-Man, you won't be needing that statue anymore. give it to me. I'd like to study its mystic properties. But his spider sense is going crazy, so he hesitates. And then Valkyrie says, "Why do you hesitate, Spider-Man? Give us the totem." And Spider-Man says, "Relax, gang, it's yours, providing you do me one tiny favor and repeat a nifty phrase I learned today."
That's right. Kanama Kalajarama. And at that point, none of them can say the phrase, and we find out Spider-Man has not been fighting alongside Devil Slayer all along. This is not the real Devil Slayer, nor are these the real Defenders. They are all Serpent Men.
Not only are they all Serpent Men, but the Defenders, the actual Defenders, are captured. They have been captured, including Devil Slayer, which is how this Serpent Man came to have his cloak to begin with, the Shadow Cloak. So Spider-Man is trying to avoid getting killed by all of these Serpent Men. He has the snake head, the serpent head, which by the way, they needed him. And this was really interesting to me, Brian, because even though the idea that Peter Parker is the spider totem wouldn't come until decades later, I think by
Straczynski.
Straczynski introduced it in Spider-Man, and they've since used it to great effect. This is sort of the precursor to that because he is a spider himself, he was allowed to take this sort of spider totem from the statue.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a fight with the Serpent Men, but Spider-Man conveniently is able to smash the thing that's keeping the Defenders captive. The Defenders escape, and as a team, Spider-Man and this gathering of Defenders is able to defeat both the Serpent Men and their cult followers.
That's right.
And then we have
the aftermath.
Hold on, I have to say this one, that Devil Slayer is telling Spider-Man he did humankind a great service this day. You should be proud. And Hulk says, "Yes, Bugman did good."
But then Spider-Man passes out, and he wakes up in Doctor Strange's house, and Doctor Strange reveals to him that the serpent bite he received has done grave damage, and unless they act quickly, Spider-Man will die before this day is through. Now, the Defenders are not in the next issue, but I have read that issue. I can tell you what happens is Doctor Strange sends Spider-Man back in time to the Hyborian Age, where he teams up with King Kull, and obviously he's cured because Spider-Man is still alive today. So,
well, he's been dead since then, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, Dan Slott, and I'm sure several others have killed him, but you know, it's comics; they always come back.
Yeah,
except for one who did not come back, and we will get to that later in J.M. DeMatteis's run on the Defenders.
Oh, okay, here we go.
Spoiler warning.
Dun,
but yeah, that takes us to Marvel Team Up 116, in which Spider-Man teams up with the Valkyrie.
Yeah, and this is actually a really interesting issue. Again, by the way, written by DeMatteis and illustrated by Herb Trimpe with Mike Esposito on inks. And this is focused on the fact that Valkyrie is also Brunhilde, the goddess named Brunhilde of Asgard, and a member of the Valkyrie, the choosers of the slain who gather the fallen warriors and bring them to Valhalla. But she's out flying around on Aragorn seeking high adventure, and she encounters, Brian, the classic Marvel Comics usual suspects mixed racial gang.
Right.
I love this element of Marvel. You know, in this era, you would have gangs who were made up of white, black, and Latino members, so that they wouldn't be saying, you know, this group is bad or this group is bad.
They only existed in Marvel Comics, and of course, one of my favorite films, The Warriors.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The Warriors is you know, that could stand to be made into a whole comic book series, actually. Freaking love that. Anyway, so Valkyrie interrupts. She kicks some ass. She scares the shit out of them by ripping a light pole out of the ground and is prepared to beat them with it, and they all flee, as you would.
Yes. And in the aftermath, she defeats them all. The young couple goes on their way, and Valkyrie, is warmed by the simple beauty of their tender embrace. All beings need love. A goddess is no exception. And although she's pondering to herself, although she loves her fellow defenders, she wonders, is there a special someone out there for her as well? She draws Dragonfang to call Aragorn to come pick her up, but something in the air reacts to Dragonfang's vibrations. Something that crackles like lightning and yet moves like a thing alive.
There you go. It broods and remembers, and it's flashing back conveniently to the previous issue of Marvel Team Up, when the alien telepath called Meru, who burst wildly into the operating theater at Mount Sinai Hospital battling the Amazing Spider-Man, and having a crossover in that episode with the mighty Thor, Brian.
That's right.
So Meru was trying to do all of these things. Meru was destroyed, or apparently destroyed, but in fact was transformed into some kind of energy, which is now this sort of horrible dark energy that senses Dragonfang and enters Dragonfang, and through it controls the Valkyrie.
That's right. So Valkyrie is now possessed
by this Meru, who is not an important character in Marvel Comics history, except in these two issues. And again, I'm just saying that. Who knows? Meru could have appeared in all kinds of comics I didn't read.
Right. But what he wants Valkyrie to do is to find Spider-Man and Thor and kill them. Kill, kill, kill.
Exactly. So, possessed by the need to kill Spider-Man and Thor, Valkyrie is riding around on Aragorn. Spider-Man happens to see her conveniently flying by, and he's looking for something to distract him. So he thinks, well, whatever she's up to, I'll join her, or maybe she can talk to him about the Black Cat. He's having some heartache over that. So he says, I'll just turn on the old Parker charm. Of course, the old Parker charm works pretty much the way it usually does, because she tries to kill him.
That's right. She says, prepare to be slaughtered, my fine cow.
That's how Mary usually greets you, isn't it?
Well, no, she greets me the way Valkyrie speaks to Spider-Man on the next page. Die, villain.
So, in any case, he reminds her that I'm the guy who saved the Defenders from the Serpent cult, and I helped you battle that lunatic. I'm one of the good guys. This is nice for us to remember these various episodes with Spider-Man. The fight continues.
I don't know that we need to recap.
No, we don't. She flings the sword at him,
though.
and in that moment, she becomes herself again. But something drives her to reclaim the sword. But Spider-Man now has seen, and he realizes that she's not herself, and that she's possessed, and that it's all tied to the sword, which drives him to go to visit Doctor Strange.
That's right. Now, what I love about this is Doctor Strange isn't home, but Wong is. Wong answers the door, and Spider-Man's like, I need Doctor Strange's help, and Wong's like, well, he's not home. Would you like to come in and have some tea?
Yeah, but Wong is there in just his mini robe.
Yep.
He's clad in nothing but his mini robe, and invites Spider-Man in for tea. And Spider-Man's like, no thanks, Wong. I don't think I'll have time for that, because here comes Valkyrie bearing down on the front door of Doctor Strange's house to try to kill him. And then he determines he's going to fight back. The press is gathering. There are news cameras now filming this. And at home, who sees this on television, Brian?
Dr. Donald Blake, a.k.a. the Mighty Thor.
There you go.
Now, for younger listeners who might be familiar with Thor only from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in Marvel Comics, he did have an alter ego, that of Dr. Donald Blake.
And Dr. Donald Blake had a limp, and he had a walking stick. And if he just banged that walking stick on the ground, it became Mjolnir, his hammer, and he transformed into Thor.
That's right. So he swings into battle, and he smashes Spider-Man and says, "Varlet, art thou mad, Spider-Man, taking arms against this fair maiden, striking one so sweet, so..." And then Valkyrie lays out Thor with one punch.
Skloom. I like that sound effect. So Spider-Man gets the sword away from Valkyrie, and now we see her mind is clearing again, and we see this moment. Now, Thor and Brunhilde, Valkyrie, have met before, but now Thor is like, damn. Her beauty be untouched by the years, her skin so soft, her hair like silk. To think that the Avengers and Defenders hath fought together in the past, and I did not even suspect. So apparently he hasn't noticed previously that Valkyrie is gorgeous.
That's right.
The sword, on the other hand, has decided to take its own vengeance. Because it's still possessed. And it's trying to stab him even though it's in his hand.
Well, not only is it trying to stab him, it flies him up into the air and tries to stab him.
Yeah, and kudos to Trimpe and Esposito for being able to make this thing look like it's actually happening. That he's struggling with this flying sword that's trying to impale him.
I love the dialogue here, too, by DeMatteis. You know, the sword says to Spider-Man, "We must slay you ourselves." And Spider-Man says, "Fat chance, sword." And then he thinks to himself, "Fat chance, sword? Sure, I'm sane."
It's entertaining. And then I also love the fact that, as crazy as this is, the members of the press with their cameras on the ground who are filming Spider-Man and the sword trying to, Spider-Man trying to prevent himself from being killed by the sword in front of the full moon in the sky. And the reporters are talking, "So, where do you want to eat? How about someplace classy like Nedick?" So just like this is every day in the Marvel Universe, a random possessed sword is trying to kill Spider-Man in the sky.
Yep. We get a nice one-page cameo from J. Jonah Jameson, who wears flowered pajamas, oddly enough.
Yeah, I like that.
But then we get my favorite part of this issue. Thor embraces Valkyrie. He says, "To be with thee again, to hold thee near, never did I dream it would be thus." And she says, "Thor, you're acting so strangely." And then we see Spider-Man flying through the air behind them. "Hey, guys!" And they're oblivious to him. Thor says, looking into Valkyrie's eyes, "I must tell thee something I have learned about us." Spider-Man goes flying by again. "Yoo-hoo, Thor!" Thor's still oblivious. Before Thor can kiss her and tell her his feelings, Valkyrie says, "No, this is not the time for revelations. My life is already far too confused." Spider-Man's like, "Oh, for crying out loud." And then he crashes to the ground next to them.
There you go. And Spider-Man says, "Smash the stupid sword to smithereens." And Thor's like, "Of course, Spider-Man, but why dost thou sound so belligerent?" He has no idea that Spider-Man has been trying to get his attention for the last 5 panels. So basically they see the ghost or the manifestation of Meru rising up out of the sword. And Thor basically throws his hammer at the thing. And he opens a warp in space that swallows yon malevolent creature, ridding of us it forever. And then Valkyrie is sad that Dragonfang is destroyed. Doctor Strange had given it to her. It had been part of her very soul. Thor says, "Hey, basically Mjolnir's been destroyed before, but it will be restored to its full glory. Dragonfang will." So there you go.
That's right. That's right. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Now, next week, Chris, I know you've got to be excited. We're going to be covering Defenders 102 through 104. We get a Nighthawk solo story. We get a Gargoyle solo story.
Yeah, which I loved.
And then we get, something big with Devil Slayer. But it finally features a character, a Defender that I know you've been looking forward to his appearance in this book.
I have been. We're talking, of course, about the bouncing blue beast of X-Men fame.
That's right.
And Avengers fame. And again, we will talk about this, but I think it's really interesting because I'm sure there are generations of comics readers who don't realize that Hank McCoy, the Beast, was even a member of the Avengers, let alone the Defenders.
Absolutely.
But in fact, he was a member of the Defenders for a really long time.
Yes, he was.
Almost 50 issues of the Defenders. Almost 1/3 of the run of the Defenders included Hank McCoy. And he becomes a really central character to this story.
That's right. He does.
No.
So be back for that next week. And in the meantime, while you're waiting for that next episode of Defenders Dialogue, check out Three Guys with Beards. That's a show that Chris hosts along with Jim Moore and Jonathan Mayberry. Or check out The Horror Show with Brian Keene. That's a show that I host along with Mary Sangiovanni, Dave Thomas, Dungeon Master, and director Mike Lombardo. Or check out Necrocasticon. That's a metal and horror show hosted by our engineer, Tommy Clark. And all of those shows are, of course, available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Spotify, and all other platforms via our very kind hosts at the Project Entertainment Network.
And I'm awake now, Brian. And
Well,
since
then
I'm
give
awake, I
us
say,
a wide
Excelsior,
awake
true believers!
What was that?
Oh, you heard me, goddammit.
No, I want a wide awake one.
It was wide awake. Excelsior, true believers!
See you next week, folks.
Do you love comic books and consider yourself a die-hard fan? Then you need to listen to Parlapod. We have news, reviews, and interviews with your favorite pros, all while bringing some serious laughs. New episodes drop every Wednesday in time for New Comic Book Day. Parlapod is available on the Project Entertainment Network, all major podcast outlets, and parlapod.com. Tune in and fuel your fandom with Parlapod.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows Three Guys with Beards, Jim Moore, Jonathan Mayberry, and Chris Golden,
Tom Clark from Necrocast Icke,
Brian Keene of The Horror Show, Chuck Buda, and Armand Rosamilia of the Mando Method,
Mary Sangiovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans,
Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith,
John Urbansick of Ink Stains,
Biz Zung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.